Sergio Perez beat Max Verstappen to win the 2023 F1 Azerbaijan Grand Prix. And this was the first time in their 2.5 year partnership that Sergio Perez beat Max Verstappen without any asterisk attached to that win. Yes, that's right. In almost 30 months of their partnership, this is the first time that you cannot put blame on anything else or point out to any other external factor that led to Perez beating Verstappen. This time around, it was clear. It was Perez being the faster of the two Red Bull drivers and hence beating Verstappen fair and square. Now, in my view, this is a remarkable and almost shocking event because, well, when something does not happen for almost 2.5 years, you don't expect it to happen. You don't expect Verstappen, a driver that has dominated almost each and every teammate in his career, to ultimately reach a point where he, well, loses out to his teammate fair and square. Now, when something like this happens, questions need to be asked, and in this video, we're going to try and do that. Now, in my view, Verstappen losing out to Perez in Baku can be put down to either of the three factors. The first being a lack of hunger this season. Second, him being overtly distracted during the Baku weekend. And third, well, Sergio Perez making leaps and bounds of improvements in the last couple of years so that he's now a worthy adversary for Max Verstappen. Now, in this video, what we're trying to do is trying to explore these three factors and ultimately aim to find out whether we can point to a singular factor that led to Verstappen ultimately losing to Perez for the first time in almost 30 months. Now, first of all, when we talk about lack of hunger, let me clarify why I'm stressing on this point. Well, I don't mean that Verstappen is not hungry for success. Not at all. That's not what I'm stressing on. What I'm trying to say here is the fact that Verstappen, unlike his predecessors, the former champions that include Lewis, Alonso, and Vettel, has never talked about having aspirations of breaking all the all-time records. When Verstappen came to Formula 1 and when Verstappen fought for the first world title, in his view, what he wanted to do was win the title once and that's it. He was happy with it. When we talk about Alonso, when we talk about Hamilton, when we talk about Sebastian Vettel, since day one, when they joined Formula 1 and when they were fighting for world titles, every time their focus was on the legacy. Their focus was on Michael Schumacher's 7 world titles. Max Verstappen, on the other hand, has never talked about it. On the other hand, he has talked about maybe retiring from the sport at the end of the 2028 F1 season when his current contract expires. That is a major difference in mindset. On one hand, you had drivers like Hamilton, Vettel, Alonso, who either wanted to emulate Michael Schumacher or beat his records, and they talked about it openly during the start of their careers. Lewis has even gone on to achieve that. Verstappen, on the other hand, has never shared aspirations to do that. His aspirations are somewhat different. He wants to do other things and maybe even go to World Endurance Championship. That are his aspirations. So when a driver has those aspirations, will he be still 100% focused on winning in Formula 1, especially after he has already achieved such a huge success? I don't know. Is the answer yes? Is the answer no? I'm not entirely sure, but what it does is that it raises question marks on the hunger that Max Verstappen possesses right now. Is he hungry for success? Does he want to win the third world championship and even go beyond and achieve much more, something that he's really capable of? Is he hungry to do that? The answer to that question is I don't really know. And that is why in a year Red Bull has a dominant car. It is Verstappen that has 2 race wins, while Sergio Perez has won 2 races and has been a winner of the sprint as well. So yeah, questions need to be asked. Now coming to the second point, and that is the distractions during the Azerbaijan Grand Prix weekend. Well, first of all, one major contrast that I see this season as compared to the last 2 championship winning seasons for Verstappen is the fact that this time around, by the 4th race of the season, he's already a runaway season favorite. Last year, he was not. Last year, he had to have the eye of the tiger because Ferrari started on a dominant note and Verstappen was struggling. And even in 2021, he was in an intense championship battle against Lewis Hamilton. That is why these days when he's in a press conference, you don't really hear the talks of a title battle because, to be fair, there isn't any. Or it was perceived that there won't be any title battle this season because Red Bull is so dominant. In 2021 and in 2022, there was a championship battle and Verstappen was entirely focused on that. To add to this season is the first time that I've seen Verstappen be so adamant about things that are not related to the title battle. The last 2 seasons I've seen him being utterly focused. And I even remember the first time the sprint format was introduced. The thing that Verstappen always pointed out and used to say quite often was, it's the same for everyone. That was his view. And even now, it might be the case that he has this view. But him being this vocal against the sprint format, and him almost losing interest, and him even admitting that I was bored by the time that we had the second qualifying. So when you hear all these things, you see that the motivation, the eye of the tiger, the focus on the championship battle, it's probably, maybe to an extent, it's not as sharp as it was in 2021 and 2022, because in both those cases, the pressure was very high and there was a clear challenger. This time around, until Perez beat him at Baku, he didn't have any clear challenger. Finally, even his insistence and his consistent remarks against George Russell was something that was a bit of a surprise, primarily because he spent far too much energy focusing on something that ultimately didn't have a major impact on his race. Ultimately, he scored 6 points instead of 8, and that is not a huge loss. What Verstappen should have been focused on was the race the next day. He wasn't. He was still going back and forth with comments in the media between him and Russell, and that is just not ideal. And you can see that he had spent far too much energy during the entire sprint weekend. First, on dismissing the sprint format, he was quite vocal about it. Then, talking about George Russell, calling him a princess and other things, which was just a back and forth between the two drivers. When you spend this much energy on things that are not important, then by the time Sunday came forward and he had to battle a driver who was on peak form, Verstappen could not retaliate. Verstappen is not a kind of driver who is in a one-to-one battle in a competitive car and he loses out. It does not happen often. It happened in Baku, and one of the reasons could have been the fact that he was not only distracted, but he had expended far too much energy on things that were not important. Now finally, the third factor, the improvement of Sergio Perez. Now this is something that we need to keep an eye on because, well, on one hand we tend to say that Sergio Perez is the king of street circuits. Well, he might be the king of street circuits, but let's get one thing clear. Max Verstappen is better than Sergio Perez on street circuits. Why? Let's take a look. First of all, in 2021, when Sergio Perez won in Baku, he won because Max Verstappen suffered a puncture late in the race. If Verstappen had not suffered a puncture, Verstappen was winning that race, not Sergio. Last season at Baku, Verstappen beat Perez by more than 20 seconds. And then even in Singapore, when Sergio Perez won the race, it was because Max Verstappen's qualifying was compromised because of Red Bull's fueling strategy. Now, of course, Monaco is an anomaly because it's still hard to conclusively say that Perez was the faster driver that weekend, especially since Verstappen's last lap, where he was on course to score a pole position, was compromised. Now, when we take a look at these races, what is evident is the fact that Verstappen is no slouch in street circuits. He's arguably as good or maybe even better than Sergio Perez. And he has been, and he has shown it in multiple races, arguably all of them. So, him losing to Perez at Baku cannot be put down to the fact that Perez is good in street circuits. That's not the case. However, there is one crucial thing that we have missed out, and that is what happened in Saudi this season. Now, when we look back at that race, Perez and Verstappen had a gap of around 5 seconds by the time Verstappen was able to make his way through the field. That gap remained steady throughout the second part of the race, and Verstappen was not able to close up. While there were many that thought that it was almost a fluke and Verstappen not being 100% fit led to it, there was probably more to it. Perez has improved, and to add to this, the Red Bull that we have this season is arguably more driver friendly. When the car is more driver friendly, the difference a driver can make, it reduces. And this season, we are arguably seeing that. More often than not, Perez is arguably just a tenth or two behind Verstappen. Arguably last season we saw the kind of gaps that Verstappen used to enjoy. This season that's not the case. And that is where the difference lies. This season, the car is good enough and it suits both the drivers. To add to this, with the car being this good, it is easier to reach the peak for both the drivers. And that is why Perez is there and thereabouts with Verstappen at almost every race. And if Verstappen is distracted, Perez can pounce on him. So yes, we cannot discount the fact that Perez has shown major improvement. In the first 4 races, you cannot point at a single race and say that Perez was off. Arguably, Australia was a bad weekend, but he was still able to salvage it to an extent. And that is where the difference lies. This season, we have an improved Perez. And that improved Perez is proving more than a thorn in the flesh for Max Verstappen. So yes, these are the 3 factors that could have led to Sergio Perez beating Max Verstappen. Now, to be honest, I'm not entirely sure which one I can pinpoint as the one that led to Verstappen losing out to Perez. It could either be a lack of hunger after winning multiple titles, it could be him being distracted at Baku, which is entirely possible, and it could even be Sergio Perez leveling up, something that could happen after 2 years driving in the same team. Which one is it? I don't know, and I'm not entirely comfortable in picking either of them. What do you guys think? Do let me know in the comment section which one do you think led to Verstappen losing out to Sergio Perez at Baku. Was it the hunger, was it the distraction, or was it Sergio Perez being an improved driver? It will be interesting to see what you guys think. Also, please like, share and subscribe. Thanks for watching and see you next time.